Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce you to two fantastic talks. You're in for a treat. Our first one would be by Michelle Sangara from York University. She will speak to us about assessing learning online, the good, the bad, and the innovative. We'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. And so I am, as I said, I don't know if everyone caught me, but I am happy to take questions along the way. When we talk about assessing and online learning in particular, it is sometimes a very scary thing to think about. It is sometimes something that is resistant to a lot of our instructors. I work at York University as a strategic team lead, so I work with a lot of faculty members on reinventing their courses for competency-based education and authentic assessment practices. So at any point, I will stop at different points of the presentation and ask if there are any questions, but please feel free to stop me and ask something as we move along. So first things first is I want to set the stage. So the innovative course frameworks that I'm going to be presenting to you today are prototypes that we have run at the York University here in Toronto, Canada. And we've run 5 course prototypes in this model. The model is called the perpetual course model. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what that model consists of here at the outset of the presentation. So like I said, I'm the team lead for strategic innovation, and we were a group of people put together out of the Office of the Associate Vice President, Teaching and Learning. Ooh, I have to admit somebody first.
I'll take care of that, Michelle. Yes, I'm glad I saw something on your slide. It's all good. I'll take care of that. Forgot to mention.
Okay, cool. So the Higher Education Quality Council in Ontario, being that we're in Ontario, had 3 distinct goals moving forward with 21st century teaching and learning. One being access. How can we improve access to higher education for all? Learning outcomes. Our students graduating with the knowledge and skills they need to succeed in life and work, because as we know, they are not in a lot of the traditional designs. And can we design as a system? Can post-secondary institutions provide high quality education in a period of continuing growth but diminished resources? So an agile team of 5 were put together at the Office of the Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning to start to figure out how can we address some of these questions moving forward. So in the design phase, the team got together and we identified needs at York University. Now, I am sure that a lot of you are going to have similar needs identified in your populations. Flexibility. Students at York University are incredibly diverse. They're commuters, they're caretakers, they're already in their careers. We have a lot of part-time students. So students at York University need flexible learning models. The administration, which is both faculty and staff members, are wasting time, spending too much of their energy and resources on administrative tasks that aren't streamlined. Engagement, we need more retention. We spend a lot of money recruiting students in first year. We want to retain them past that first year mark. And of course, expand the reputation of York University as an innovative institution. So the perpetual course model integrates cognitive computing structures, which I'll tell you more about, and presence pedagogy, which again, I'll tell you what that's about. But the outcomes are a workload shift. So students are making decisions, choosing how they learn, progress through modular learning pathways, much more streamlined, inclusive design, flexible entry points. Perpetual means that students can enroll when it makes sense. If you want to enroll in the course on February 14th, if you want to enroll on June the 26th, it doesn't matter, the course is perpetually available for you, and the structure of the design allows you to flow through and personalize that experience at any point of entry. Interactive, interaction-focused, customized user experience. Okay, so you can tell that there's a big opportunity here to enhance the programs we offer at York, create new ways of designing teaching and learning systems, and position ourselves as leaders in the technology-enhanced teaching and learning space. So it's a big project, obviously not just assessment, right? But I'm going to hone in on the assessment. I just want to provide context. So in the design of these innovative course models, this new way of looking at teaching and learning at the course level, we've got hardware. So we are working in parallel with the university's IT center service and facilities. We're working with Moodle as our learning platform. So everything I show you today lives in Moodle. We've got learning technology service supports at the software level. We've got coding and maintenance support staff in the software level. So the project, in order to create prototypes like this, you need the people, you need the hardware, you need the software, and you need the structure. So cognitive computing, AI, artificial intelligence, IBM Clouds Watson, we use at York. We have a relationship with IBM, and we are able to leverage both their Watson platform and APIs that they run. So application program interface. Okay, so that's the tech back end. If you are interested in how the tech plays a role in actualizing the assessment structures, ask me. I wanted to just give you context about the tech side of things and then the instructional side of things before we get very assessment specific. So the general instructional principles that are living in these innovative prototypes are modular redesign, content reimagined, modules self-paced through modular content modules, not weeks of content, not chapters of content. Every module has process-based activities. You can't assess something like skills or competencies if you don't have the pedagogical interventions to allow students to demonstrate learning in that way. So it's critical that we have the right activities so that we can measure the right stuff. So we design things called ideas in practice, which I will show you examples of. And then we can have a skills focus on our assessment because we assess process and we give them process-based activities. So that's the context of the design model that the assessment innovations that we're going to talk about today live under. Any questions at this point on the perpetual course as this larger initiative that has curricular, pedagogical, and assessment components that are supported by artificial intelligent hardware and software? That's the general umbrella that we're going to live under. So as we dive deeper now into the details of what is involved pedagogically in these courses. So we needed to give them two types of assignments that allow us to assess the way we want. So the first one is a major project, okay? This is the courses, the 5 prototypes that we've created exist in large enrollment undergrad courses. So these courses are completely online. They have at least 200 students enrolled in them. And we're running a major project assignment. What? We can't do major projects in a large enrollment undergrad class. How are we going to grade them all? So leveraging the technology to be able to use pedagogy that we know to be good, like a project, at scale. So the students get to choose. They get to choose their question. Pick one of 3. This is a natural science course. But again, we've prototyped multiple different courses in multiple different faculties. What are the relationships between? So they get to choose the question they're going to investigate. And every module asks them to think about their major project. How does this modular content relate to your major project? Now we also have these ideas in practice that I was mentioning before. Every module also has one of these. So examples of experiential learning assignments that don't require you to be on campus, okay? Go outside and look around. Give the location you're currently situated. How would you describe your location in terms of the surface structures you've learned about in this module? Be detailed, use course terminology, okay? Earthquakes, choose a building near you and investigate the building codes as they relate to earthquake safety. Perhaps interview building staff. Is there a local earthquake station? Where is the nearest seismic monitoring station? Experiential learning opportunities for a completely online course. Now, with each of these activities comes questions. So when the student responds and submits this in each module, they have to answer the following questions. Please explain the steps you took to answer this question. So they write it down like a procedure. First, I did this, then I did this because, and they get better, right? Module 1, when they hand this assignment in, it's the first time they're answering that question in module 1, their answers are not that good. But our TAs are trained and our instructor is trained to grade modules 1 to 3 easier, as it were. They're seen as a growth stage, a diagnostic stage. And then we have a formative stage where the assessment rubric becomes more difficult between modules 3 and 5. And then they are expected to have learned through those modules, and modules 5 to 8 are graded more severely, if you want to call it that, but just with understanding that they've grown in this process. Please use the language of the lesson and textbook when describing the scientific concepts, right? Call it a chemical bond, not two molecules stuck together. So we're getting content knowledge revisited in these process assignments. What was challenging about this experience? How did you resolve those challenges? If we want to measure problem solving, we have to actually ask them what was a problem and how you went about solving it. So these major projects and these experiential learning assignments are critical elements of the assessment process, obviously. This is how they're demonstrating learning. Another example in another course is checkpoint. So they have assignments that these assignments are not modular. They happen, there are 12 modules in the course, but each of these houses in the map is a checkpoint. And at each checkpoint, they have to, at each checkpoint, they have to produce an individual video submission based on these key questions. Create a group video based on the feedback of your individual. This instructor wanted to have the same experiential learning activities, but they wanted it to be video-based recordings and they wanted it to be group-based. So we've tailored their experiential learning assignments for what the instructor wanted in their course. This course is also gamified, so it's also why he has more visuals in his course. Another course wanted to have what was called creative assignments. So a creative assignment was where you can see inside the box, depending on how many readings you choose to integrate, the value of the creative assignment increases. So this creative assignment is called Letter to the Editor. And they happen again at different windows, submission windows in the course, or checkpoints or modules. It's the same concept, but we tailor each course to what that instructor is looking for. So this instructor wanted to have checkpoints, modules, where at each module there was a creative assignment. And the students always have choice. So the letter to the editor is just one of a list of 5 creative assignments they could choose in this module. And they get to decide how many readings they're integrated, and the weighting of their creative assignment increases depending on the number of readings included. The instructor has given them a list of 12 readings for each assignment, or for the module has 12 readings. Okay, again, we can talk more about the assignments. Again, so you feel free to ask me more about the assignments if that is interesting to you. The skills design. Now, how do we grade these assignments, right? So first things first, everything in all the courses that are fitting under this perpetual course model, right? That big umbrella we talked about at the beginning, has integrated competencies. So you got course content, right? You got knowledge, you gotta have the knowledge. We're not saying replace knowledge with skills. We're saying grade knowledge, but also grade skills. So the 5 content areas for this course, every course that we design always has concepts and terminology, those first 2 markers, but the last 3 content knowledge pieces change depending on what the instructor is focused on in that course. So for this is the science, earth and atmosphere course. So content knowledge is around inquiry, it's around math, media literacy, right? These are all knowledge-based structures that the instructor wanted. Excuse me. And every course we prototype in the perpetual model includes these 5 skills of innovation. The definition of which can change, pardon me, the definition of which can change depending on the course, but we're always measuring empathy, communication, creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. Every course measures these same 5 skills, innovation skills, in line with the content knowledge. A key part of, oh, you did it. While I scroll through, are there any questions up into this point in the chat that you could share with me, Barbara?
Right now, I don't have any. I just want to invite people that you can find your chat in the bottom part of your screen. Click it open, ask your question. I am happy to relay it. We're good to go, Michelle.
Okay, great. So this is the rubric structure, and this is what it looks like when we grade them. So whether they've submitted a journal entry, whether they've submitted a video, whatever the instructor is choosing as their embodiment of the assignment, the process-based assignment, this is what the rubric looks like for every teacher. So they've got the quantitative score, and then they've got the qualitative comments. Our TAs are trained on the qualitative comments specifically. We don't use exemplars in the 1 to 4 leveling criteria for the quantitative scores, and we can talk about why we don't do that. If people do use exemplars or don't, it's a question for discussion. But there is a very clear structure for how these things are assessed. It is not a vague thing. It's very specific, and they get it again and again and again. In order for consistency and growth to happen, they need to see the same assessment rubric over and over again, which is what happens in the course. So obviously great communication with students is key. When they log on to their course platform, they see all this stuff. What's happening at the checkpoints? What's up with creative assignments? What are my deadlines? What's the grade breakdown? And they see how they're going to be graded. And it tells them exactly more about the competency, more about the skills. So this stuff is very communicated. Instructors make videos on the grading process because it is new for students. When we give them new experiential assignments, we give them skills that they're being graded on, which is new. You have to teach on those skills, teach on the assessment. So in week 1, there's a big assessment education happening between instructor and student.
Michelle, we had a question from Angela about if there is a template of the assessment rubric that you showed us, if that could be found online.
It doesn't exist anywhere online right now, but I'm happy to share the link to these slides.
The slides will be uploaded at the site. And another question from Nicholas is, who is doing the grading, humans or Watson?
Okay, excellent question. So where does the technology come into play, and where does the instructor come into play? Oh, you know what? That's what, Nicholas, thank you for that question, because it's perfect segue. So we communicate to students, and then we have to track students. Okay, so how is the technology helping us, and what are humans doing? Here's what the technology is doing. Humans are doing the assessment, okay? There are sets of TAs. There are only a small number of assignments. They happen in windows. So when the students are all assigned into the course, TAs are given a cohort of students. So usually in a 200 student classroom, a teacher will get 4 TAs. So a TA has 50 students, and that TA follows that student and is a support for that student working through. So they'll have 8 of those rubrics to fill out for each one of those students, but it happens in windows. So we've reallotted the TA time to make sure that the TAs are getting the time on the assessment and feedback portion, because that's what we want the TAs to focus on. We can talk more about TA training because it comes back also in the questions from the research now about what trends are emerging. Okay, what's the technology doing? The Watson, IBM, and artificial intelligence are still learning. These systems are not at such a level, they don't know enough yet to produce a grade that a student would find valuable, or that a teacher, you'd find it reliable, okay? So IBM Watson is consuming all of the assignments, and it's producing a grade that it thinks at this point, given the information it knows, right? It's still a toddler in how it's learning. So York University and IBM, part of the work that we're doing together is Watson is getting access to all of our data, which is teaching it more about how students display learning in this way. And it's populating a dashboard for teachers to refer to and look at and use. And this will eventually get to such a stage where parts of the assessment process, whether it be the reflective journals, can actually be graded by the artificial intelligence and allow teachers to focus even more on the major project assignment, for example, and supporting students through that. But currently right now, the AI is focused on producing grades in a learning capacity, and it shows the teacher those, but the student does not see them. And also the technology is heavy in the checks for understanding and formative assessment. So no human does the formative assessments, which will be interesting in the next presentation to hear their opinions on this. But formative assessment are checks for understanding, very quantitative, we heavily rely on the ebook in that sense too, and the questions that exist in the ebook. So that's fully technology. But the ideas and practice experiential assignments and the major projects are human graded. And we are working currently, it doesn't look like this in Moodle, it's getting closer, but this is what we want eventually the student-facing dashboard to look like. There is a student-facing dashboard. We're getting more and more courses to agree on the competencies, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to expand the student-facing dashboard in relation to the skills progression across their degree program, across courses, not just for one course. So this is getting built out as we speak, just like the dashboard for the instructor is getting fleshed out as we speak. Any questions right now on the details that I've shared thus far, either on the assessment, the assignments that we've produced, and the assessment structures in place to grade them?
Right now we're good, and we have a good 2 minutes to wrap this up.
Perfect.
Oh,
So
we got a question. We got a question.
Okay.
Can I throw it out to you?
Okay.
Jenny's asking, how are students informed about this data usage flowing through IBM/Watson? What has student response been? How has the data so far, how's the data so far been helpful?
Oh yeah, so really helpful in teaching the, when there are APIs, right? These applications that IBM has, which can do things like narrative analysis. So it could read a block of text and tell you what the person was feeling. Well, to the best of its ability at this stage of development of the AI. It can produce grades for empathy, creativity. And to be honest, the TAs have found it much more difficult to produce when we do the comparative analysis of like, okay, so the computer read that journal and the TA read that journal. The TAs actually are finding it a lot more difficult to grade empathy and creativity than the computer is. The computer sentiment analysis, narrative analysis, personality trait analysis, what the computer is doing in producing some of this skill, these assessment grades, is going to be very complementary to the instructors at some point. Students have found it very interesting working with the AI structures. They all have to sign a waiver at the outset of a prototype of the 5 prototype courses that we've run. That they understand that they're in a research project that is being researched, that data is being collected. But that's more the data coming to me as the lead researcher. The IBM and York have created an agreement that's happened at the level of procurement around data security. So the work I'm leveraging a relationship in our team of strategic innovation and designing these types of courses. I'm leveraging a relationship with IBM that already existed above us. So your organization would work to form a relationship with IBM in order to have access and all the privacy and security considerations. So all that stuff has been cleared at the higher echelons and between. So we have a data security agreement from IBM that I pass on to the students so that they're aware what those security procedures are. But I didn't negotiate those security procedures; they were already in existence. I'm going to quickly just wrap up and then we'll take any other questions. But the things that we've learned, these are going to look real familiar to everybody. Time management. We at the beginning said you have these assignments and you can hand them in whenever. It didn't go well, right? We've run 3 prototypes now, and that was the first year. The second year we had windows. This last year of iteration, definitely submission windows, checkpoints, right? Your assignment has a due date, even if that due date is a window. Otherwise, procrastination abounds, both from TAs marking and students submitting. So support check-ins are also needed. So we've instituted an office hour format on assignments, which I can talk about if people are interested.
Michelle, can I ask you to please, I'm sorry, to wrap up in about 30 seconds or less, because I want to keep time equal for our next.
Absolutely. So
we can all stay on after.
Communication structures, we did a lot of heavy communication at the outset, but students really want to make sure that we're checking back in with them. The feedback on each assignment has been a really critical part of growth in their skills. So you don't know what you don't know, right? Students were like, what the heck are process skills? How am I supposed to be you got to give time, grade the first few assessments differently than you do the last 2, allow for growth in the development of skills across the board, TAs and students alike. So these are the questions that we're looking at moving forward with next steps. And I'm happy to talk more after the second group has completed their presentations about time management, communication, all things good, bad, and innovative about online assessment.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'll ask you if you can stop sharing your screen, and I'd like to invite Diane Murata and Cindy Ives, both from Athabasca University, to talk to us about formative evaluation of a master level online course. Over to you both.
All right, great. So it's wonderful to be here, and thank you all for being here as well. And that was a great presentation, by the way, Michelle. Very interesting. I think actually a good segue would be to start with what we actually mean by formative evaluation. We are talking about formative evaluation as opposed to assessments, student assessments. We are referring to the evaluation of instructional design or course design as a formative process. So it's the ongoing evaluation that would happen during the design and development stages of the instructional design process. Yeah, and so I'll just start with that. And I will then start by introducing myself. My name is Diane, and I am an instructional designer. I've actually graduated from the Concordia University EdTech program here about almost 10 years ago, and currently work in higher education as an instructional designer. And I'm also a student in the Doctorate of Education at Athabasca University, which is offered online in the distance education program. And just a little side note, this was actually the first time that, although I do online course design and have been for the past 8 years or so, I had never actually taken an online course before. So, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to also get involved in this program. So I'll let Cindy introduce herself.
Thank you, Diane. I'm also a Concordia University graduate. I have a PhD in educational technology, and currently I am a professor in Athabasca University's master and doctoral programs in distance education.
Okay. So just a quick review of what we will be covering today. So we are going to take you through the context of the course and the evaluation process and of the formative evaluation. We will then talk about the actual formative evaluations and some key decisions and findings that came out of that. And then we'll finish off with our conclusions and lessons learned about the process that we took. And so, yes, so back to formative evaluations. So like I said previously, we are using it in terms of improving course design, as well as we also wanted to demonstrate the value of conducting a formative evaluation, since it's not something that's done too often in the field of instructional design, although it's promoted a lot. Yes, and so typically the data is collected prior to the delivery of instruction, and it's usually the different sources come from multiple. So we have multiple sources that we collect data from, such as expert technical and editorial reviews, as well as from pilot data. And this can take the form of learner feedback, like small pilot group, small group of learners, as well as from system analytics and artifacts. So for our case, we actually conducted the formative evaluation throughout the fall semester. And this was to evaluate design changes that were made to an already existing course. And so we did this with an existing cohort of students and got feedback from several different sources, which we'll get into a little bit later. So I'll let Cindy talk a little bit about the course context.
Thanks, Diane. So this is a course called Trends and Issues in Instructional Design. It's an advanced ID course. I've taught it a few times, but I recently acquired responsibility for it as coordinator. This is in the context of Athabasca University's Master of Education in Open Digital and Distance Education. The course is taught every fall with 20 to 30 students. The online course design is updated regularly, like all of our courses, but after a program review and a new university-wide learning framework, I had this opportunity to undertake a major revision. End of course evaluations have typically a fairly low response rate. They're also primarily focused on delivery, and they can't often be modified, so they don't really address instructor concerns with respect to design. And as a designer myself, teaching designers advanced instructional design, I wanted to model a number of instructional design practices and principles in the redesign of the course. So the course is built on universal design for learning principles and accessibility regulations. I wanted as well to have an external evaluator or a series of external evaluators to look at the course so that I would have multiple perspectives from multiple instructional designers. Diane was offered as an external evaluator in an internship in her instructional design course in the doctoral program. And so she came into the course to conduct this formal formative evaluation to seek input from the students and from these other instructional design experts that I mentioned. And I think, Diane, you can move on to the sources of data.
Perfect. So yeah, so like I mentioned before, and Cindy as well, we wanted to get as wide as perspective as we could to see what was really happening in the course. So we enlisted students, experts in the field of instructional design, a faculty member, and we also looked at course analytics and artifacts in the course. We included also our own observations and to come to our conclusions. So we administered questionnaires that were both open and closed, with both open and closed-ended questions to collect qualitative and quantitative feedback from the students and the reviewers. So ultimately, this represented 3 core perspectives. So the learner feedback, the professional perspective, and the teaching perspective. So learner feedback was used to examine the learning experience. So what helped or hindered students from attaining the learning objectives, and including any issues that they may have encountered, as well as the UDL components, and to determine really what students found valuable and most relevant to their professional practice. On the other hand, the expert reviewers were asked to focus on delivery methods or the strategies used, and the learning environment. So they were asked to review things like UDL, learning strategies, usability issues, alignment with learning outcomes, as well as to provide any recommendations. So anything that can impact the learning process, basically, was solicited in terms of feedback and recommendations. So Cindy, who also teaches the course, was also, as well as a peer faculty member, also provided their notes and reflections to provide that additional perspective. So this is what really informed the decisions that were taken for future revisions for the following iteration of the course. So just get here. So the main themes that came out of all the data that we collected was are listed here, and basically we focused on those themes that were found across both the student and the expert perspectives. So on the plus side, both groups found the UDL components valuable to their learning experience. So they really enjoyed the multiple means of access and expression that they had available to them. They found important and valuable for their learning, the social learning and the community piece in the course, both synchronously and asynchronously. On the other hand, common thread across both groups was that the organization and structure of the course was challenging to follow, including having issues with the digital reading list. So in the next slide, Cindy will expand more on these and the potential solutions that she envisions for the future.
So I think we were delighted to see that the students and the reviewers agreed with each other, expressing support and appreciation for the grounding of the course in UDL principles and in social learning approaches that were consistent with the MEd program overall. They offered suggestions for additional enhancements in line with these two foundations, as is shown on the slide there: audio podcasts, instructor videos, live sessions, and so on. With respect to UDL, all of the suggestions that were made for improvements make sense to me, except for one which has to do with multiple assignment formats. And it's interesting where this is connected to the session we just saw. There was one experiment with a website rather than a formal academic paper, which was really difficult for me to grade and not difficult to provide feedback on, but rubrics need to be rethought and adapted, and Michelle's referred to that. So that was challenging for me, and I will have to think about how to implement some of those suggestions. On the social learning side, there were some ideas for improving group discussions and collaborative learning activities. It was a very large class. We were able to make adjustments mid-course as a result of student feedback, and that was very encouraging, and it worked very well. And some students requested more live sessions. The switch to those smaller online groups made a much greater improvement in the quality of the conversations. When you have 26 people all responding to one question, and you've got 200 or 300 or 500 posts, it's pretty hard for everybody to navigate. So we were able to manage that very effectively. Other suggestions for additional guests and topics related to the trends. And the trends in instructional design are changing all the time. So this is a course that's likely going to change as we move forward. Diane, if you move to the next slide, we can talk a little about the real challenges with the flow and the sequencing of the structure and scheduling of the activities. All the recommendations, again, for reorganization make sense to me, as I struggled too. Even though I designed the course, I struggled with the transformation of a traditional textbook wraparound course model to something that was more open and flexible. So having the access to all these brilliant instructional designer brains, not just Diane and the experts, but the students themselves, really, I think, is contributing to a dynamic and important course going forward. Reflection activities, for example, were new to the course, representing a program level enhancement and connecting to the new learning management or the learning environment framework that I mentioned. They weren't really fully integrated with the existing or revised learning activities. And so recommendation for structural and conceptual reorganization really important to me and will ensure smoother navigation overall. On the reading list, most of you who teach, especially, well, at any level, I think, too many readings is a classic complaint from our students, most of whom are employed full-time with family and other obligations. They want to read strategically. And I misjudged their capability, actually, and expected them to be able to access library resources, as this is explicitly taught in the first course in this program. However, the students unfortunately didn't learn those skills or forgot them. And so I need to do something about a reminder tutorial. I had originally intended to create an annotated bibliography for easier navigation of the course readings, but I ran out of design time, another classic challenge with faculty who are working on enhancing their courses. I still think that that's an excellent idea, and a Zotero group for the course will be an asset as well as an expectation, because this past term, this winter, I taught the prerequisite course and there was one in that course. So there will be one in the future edition of this course going forward. Diane.
Okay, so what's interesting is what we found is that, going back to the instructional design literature, is that the literature supports all the feedback that came out of those reviews. So in terms of UDL and social learning, that these support promote meaningful learning. In terms of cognitive load, strategies like chunking information and the structural organization can help improve retention and support schema building in students. And finally, also the quality rubrics that are commonly used to evaluate course design also support all the themes that we found. So going back to that kind of just validated our sense that what we were finding was actually, was a good thing. So So we applied a systematic approach to conducting the formative evaluation. And so we did this to make sure that, we considered all the multiple viewpoints and also to obtain an evidence-based approach to decision making. So using this approach helped us identify key decision points. It also ensured that we did not forget important aspects of the evaluation. At the same time, it helped myself and Cindy be on the same page about the process and the progression of the evaluation. And it gave us a point of reference for discussions about the evaluation, about conducting the evaluation, etc. So this approach builds on various evaluation models, and it also provides guidelines about the goals, questions, and criteria to consider in each step. So personally, I found this a very helpful resource or reference during the planning process of the evaluation, as well as going through, throughout the process itself. Here we go. And so obviously this conducting a formal formative evaluation comes with has challenges. I think especially because it's a multi-step process and it involves many stakeholders. So there's a whole management and time piece that can be very challenging, like any instructional design project actually. And it's important to invest the time upfront to establish a good communication at the very beginning, to develop trust, and to also learn about the particular context. Especially for me, that was particularly important since I was not the course designer of the course. So I was not familiar with the course at all. At the very beginning, it's important to work with the instructor to clarify the intended goals of the evaluation before actually starting work on the evaluation itself. And in the future, I think upon reflection, this is something that I would start earlier and plan more time for, especially, like I said before, since I wasn't familiar with the course. So there was just, quite a bit of time to ramp up, so to speak, to before actually starting with the conducting the evaluation. So in general, like I said, the main challenges involve managing the time and people involved in the project. So some things to consider when conducting a formative evaluation is to allow the extra time to find experts who can provide significant feedback. So if you want someone who's an expert in UDL, to find that right person. If you want someone who's an instructional designer, to find that right person, to make sure that they have the time to do it as well, at the time that you need them to do it as well. So that's one of the things that I would, plan ahead for. And if you're conducting it during the semester like we did, I would also factor in the extra time to get student buy-in so that you can get a higher response rate. So for example, we presented a brief session on what, formative evaluation and what we were doing and the goals of the project. And in the future, I would start both the expert reviews and the student reviews earlier, just so that if there are some changes that we want to implement during the semester, we have more time to do that. And so that gives you a little bit more flexibility and more options. Finally, in the future, I would start the data collection process with predetermined categories. So I went about it and kind of just let that emerge from the data, but I think it would be much more efficient in hindsight to start with predetermined categories. And if you download the handout that's included with this session, in there you'll find there are 12 essential standards that came out of an article that reviewed some common evaluation instruments that are used in higher education. And so that could be a good starting point in terms of what to look for in terms of the feedback that you want to get. Cindy?
So this formative evaluation process, in my view, improves not only the end product, in other words, the students in the fall term of this course are going to have a better course even than the ones last fall. So the end product, the course design, the learning experience, but also the instructional design process and my own skill set as a designer, as well as my skill set as an instructor during the first delivery and then in future iterations. The whole process provides a framework to engage in conversations with colleagues with similar and different perspectives about tracking impact, interpreting data, and using evidence to support decisions rather than just gut feeling. The collaborative process between faculty and educational developers, the value of shared expertise, the value of sharing the experience and the process, and overall a growth mindset, creating a new awareness in me, a designer of long standing, designing my own course and then teaching it and then thinking about it is a reflective process. And the reflections that emerged about challenges and opportunities. The next steps in this process, and you can go to the next slide, Diane, involve integration and dissemination. So this is part of the dissemination. We're going to integrate several of the recommendations for improvement in the fall. The lessons will be learned to make this formative evaluation process more manageable. And I'll certainly be sharing it with my colleagues at Athabasca to see how this might work in other courses. In order to do that, we have to simplify, as Diane said, the data collection process, start earlier and so on. And piloting it possibly in other courses to refine it and make it more usable, more sustainable, more doable in the future. And I think we are about 1 minute from our time. We can take questions. And Diane already hinted that there are resources available. There's also these slides are available.
And we'd like to thank everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I invite everyone to take advantage of our minute to ask any questions you have for Cindy or for Diana. You can type into chat. It is open to everyone.
Thank you, Nicholas.
I don't see any questions coming in right now, so I will actually end the session by thanking you both and thanking Michelle and thanking everyone for participating this afternoon in my time zone. We are having a networking event in the next 13 minutes that I invite you all to go back to the site and consult the calendar. And I look forward to meeting virtually again tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone.